What I want to talk about today is a very practical question in a person's spiritual life. Is the goal, the only success, victory? Or is staying in the battle also called success? Now I want to start with a preliminary. There is a statement in the tradition that Hashem gives each person all of the means necessary to succeed at every challenge. He gives everyone all of the means that are necessary to succeed at every challenge. When people hear that, they naturally think, well, I'm trying to accomplish something that needs to be done. The Torah wants me to do it. There's an obstacle in my way. I can't take no for an answer because I'm being told that I really have the means to overcome that obstacle. And if I don't overcome it, that must mean that I don't really want to, because if I really wanted to, I do have the means to be able to do it. And then if I don't do it, that means that I'm not really sincere, or I'm fooling myself. I don't really mean what I'm saying, what I'm doing. And I think that's a mistake, because the ability to succeed at every challenge isn't the same as the ability to overcome every obstacle, because not every obstacle is a challenge. And indeed, I think what you should do is use the traditional statement, but use it backwards. Since we are told that we have the means to successfully to be successful at every challenge, if there's an obstacle that I don't have the means to overcome, that obstacle isn't a challenge. Use that principle to identify which obstacles are challenges, which obstacles aren't challenges.
What does it mean to succeed?
Well, the challenge is to do something, like learn for 4 hours without distraction, or pray without distraction, or not respond with anger to people who provoke you.
So there's no singular definition of success. It's just kind of based contextually on achieving a goal that you set out.
Or maybe the way I put the subject had a misleading connotation. I meant there to be many, many different challenges, and each one, vis-a-vis each one of the challenges, you could either define success as overcoming the challenge, or just staying in the game of fighting to get there. That's what I'm glad you mentioned that. I could have made it clearer. So now, for example, people do face obstacles in life, and they think that they've made a fair attempt. They think they've used all the resources that they have as best they can, and they don't succeed. If you made the mistake I started with, then they would condemn themselves as not being honest, or not being in touch with their real selves, and not really caring, and not really trying, when all of that may be completely superfluous, because this obstacle, being as difficult as it is, wasn't meant for you to overcome. It wasn't the challenge that you should overcome it. Often, the real challenge is to live with the fact that you can't overcome it. That's the challenge. I'll give you a practical example. Now, you guys are young, but I can almost guarantee that you will face this in life, because every time a person becomes a parent, I think faces this multiple times. Your child has a problem. And you know the answer to the problem. And it hurts you that your child has the problem. And you want to help your child. But your child can't take the answer from you. Maybe the child's 13, and the child doesn't want to appear helpless and a baby and in need of his parents. No, he's independent. He's going to climb Mount Everest on his own. He's going to make $1 million next year on his own. He's independent and powerful. He can't take it from you. So if you say, well, here's the problem is my child is suffering and I know how to solve the suffering, so my challenge is to get him to take it from me, that could be a mistake. That's not the challenge. The challenge is, number one, to put my ego aside and say, look, do I care about the fact that I will succeed in solving the problem? Or do I care about helping my child? Maybe if I gave the solution to my wife, or to a friend, or to a teacher, and let that person use the solution to help my child could take it from that person. Just can't take it from me. He's fighting out adolescent battles with his father. If I really care about the child, I'll put that aside and I'll say, I'll give it to somebody else and let him solve it. And realize that in terms of my own ability to control things and improve things, I have to live with my disability. I cannot do this. I'm not able to handle this. That would be the real challenge. So a person should not think that because we have the ability and the means to succeed at every challenge, that means we can remove every obstacle or overcome every obstacle. Some obstacles are meant to be overcome, and they are really challenges, and some obstacles are not meant to be overcome. Now, when you read about great Jews, and you read about the things that they did, that too can be very depressing. You know, the Gaon of Vilna studied Torah maybe 16 hours a day with great concentration, no distraction. If I make it through 3 hours without any distractions, I think I'm having a good day. But what a gigantic failure that is. Why don't I do what the Gaon of Vilna did? Because I'm not facing a challenge to be the Gaon of Vilna. That's not my challenge. The obstacle of 16 hours a day, for me, is an obstacle that can't be overcome, and therefore it's not meant as a challenge to me. One of the great Rebbes, Succes, said, when I come up before the heavenly court, and they ask me what I did with my life, and they say to me, why weren't you Abraham? They'll say, you didn't give me the abilities of Abraham. You didn't put me in that position of history. You didn't give me the divine help to be an Abraham. Why weren't you King David? Why weren't you Rabbi Kiva? The problem will be when they'll ask me, why weren't you Zusha? Why did you do what you could do? Then I won't have an answer. So it's very important to use this criterion as objectively as you can. And by the way, when you want to know what your capabilities are, whether you really are honest with yourself or whether you're rationalizing, it's very helpful to talk to other people and to see what they say, especially if they're older people and they've had experience in seeing people face challenges like this. And in this respect, it's very much like sports. I exercise regularly, and I have people who help me plan what I do. And on a number of occasions, the trainer has said to me, either you could do much more than you're doing. And I remember a couple of times I thought, what? He wanted to, I was running a certain amount of time, and he said, you could up it by 50%. I was over 60 years old at the time. 50% in one shot, not gradually. He said, I think you could do it. So I took his word for it, and the next time I did it, and it wasn't that hard. I didn't realize that I was holding myself back. But he, as a trainer, could see that. And other times, I'll ask him, should I do this? He'll say, no, you're in danger of hurting yourself, and if you hurt yourself, you're not going to be able to train at all. Don't do that. You're not ready for that. So you take their advice because they have the experience to be able to give you that advice. The same thing is true with spiritual development. There are people who can give you good advice as to what's worth trying, what isn't, what counts as a genuine challenge for you at a particular time, and what doesn't count as a genuine challenge. Okay, now let's move to the topic that I advertised. This too, you're very young, but this may have happened to you already in some measure and will happen if you lead a life like most people. It comes to Yom Kippur. Well, Yom Kippur is when you make an accounting. What have I done in the past year? What are my strengths? You can count your strengths. And what are my weaknesses? What are my successes? What are my failures? What am I going to do to try to improve my performance? And you resolve to do the best that you can. And let's imagine Yom Kippur's in October, so January, March, May, you're sailing along. The resolutions you made, you're keeping, you're actually performing better. But it comes to July, things get tough. And by the time August comes, it's over. Then you're back to where you were last August. Last August. So now it's September, and Yom Kippur's coming in a few weeks, and you think, well, what did I accomplish? I tried, maybe that's nice, but in the end, I didn't succeed because I'm back to the same failures. When I come to Yom Kippur, and I declare my failures, a lot of the items are going to be the same items that were on the list last year. So am I really just, going nowhere? And is that something that's appreciated? Is that something that's worthwhile? So for many years, when I used to speak, before Yom Kippur in the yeshiva, I used to tell people it's natural to feel that way. It's normal to feel that way, but a year is a long time. And you're really not the same person that you were last year. And that means there's no reason to expect that if last year you didn't succeed in making a permanent change, that this year you can't succeed. And even if you're 30 already and you've done it several times, still, a lot of things happen in a year. And your circumstances change, and they're either successes or failures, and their relationships come and go. So the thought that maybe this year it'll be different isn't a wrong thought. It isn't an unreasonable thought. But about 10 years ago, I was looking in the Siva Shalom, written by the previous Slonimer Rabbi, and he makes a very important point. He says, the very fact that you haven't given up, the very fact that you still want the outcome, the very fact that you're still fighting means that you're spiritually alive. And that's not nothing. That's not nothing. Now let me illustrate this for you with a famous parable, which they use in the Mussar schools. What they say is, everyone's either going up or down. There's no such thing as staying in the same place. And they give the analogy of taking a fish, which has been out of water for a while, and it might be alive, it might be dead, and throwing it into a moving stream, and saying, if it goes upstream, it's alive. If it goes downstream, it's probably dead and just floating downstream with the current of the stream. Everybody's going up or down. So I thought to myself, just a minute. I know from my own experience, becoming a Baal Tshuva, there were periods of rapid change, and then there were periods of sort of consolidating when the amount of mitzvahs that I did, the way that I did them, was really on a plateau. I don't think I was going up or down. So why would you say that you're either going up or going down? Why couldn't you just be on a plateau? And then I thought to myself, let's go back to the fish. So if it goes upstream, it's definitely alive. Goes downstream, probably it's dead and floating downstream. What happens if the fish stays at the same place in the water? Doesn't go upstream and it doesn't go downstream. Is it alive or dead?
It's alive.
It's got to be alive, because if it were dead, it'd be floating downstream, right? So now, that means the fish is still swimming. And that means its muscles are still strong and getting stronger. So don't look at the external performance. Don't look at the behavior. Look inside. What's going on inside? If he's holding to the place that he was, that takes effort rather than letting entropy erode his organization and become degraded. So he's still making the effort, and that means he's still strengthening himself, still focusing himself. That's not nothing. So that could be what the Slonimer Rebbe is talking about. The fact that you still care about it and you're still making an effort means that you're not spiritually dead. So then that leaves open the possibility, for the way I announced the topic, that maybe victory isn't the only success. But being in the battle is also a success, rather than giving up the battle. Now, that might mean that your whole life you'll be in the battle. And that'll be your success. Your success is that you stayed in the battle and didn't quit. Just one second. I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again because I think it's a very striking thing. As I told you, I'm working on the Tanya at the present time. Tanya says a person who has regularly foreign thoughts, machshavos zoros, and they can be very disturbing. You can have them while you're praying, and you can have them while you're learning Torah. Although if you learn with the chavrusa, it almost never happens because you're fighting with the other guy, so you're focused. But you have it, and they bother you. Don't think, boy, I'm a bad guy. I'm a bad guy because look at all these bad thoughts that I have. No, that could be precisely the battle that the Kodesh Baruch Hu wants you to fight. He wants you to fight the battle of chasing out bad thoughts. So bad thoughts are your spiritual resources. What you do with them is your fight, and that your success when you push them out. Not that they stay out, they come back. They will come back. And after Yom Kippur, it will come back again. And your spiritual success is pushing it out. Then you could say, look, this is what the Kodesh Baruch Hu put me in the world for. He wants me to be in the world to push out these bad thoughts. So the same thing is true with illicit desires. The same thing is true with bad character traits, whether it's laziness or irascibility, meaning that you get angry easily, or whatever. These are things which can be the assignment that you have. Now, I want to add one more thing here because I saw something in Rav Kook which really, I was learning it together with my Rebbitzin, and this really astounded us. I didn't see it in any other sefer, and I think it's a very profound insight. Given that the two successes we've described is victory and staying in the battle, what about a person who drops out of the battle? That's what's called in Hebrew yush. Yush means he gives up. He's giving up. Giving up means I'm not trying anymore. I'm not pushing anymore. I'm going to just accept it. Cook said, yes, it's a terrible condition to be in, but there's something worse. Because a person who is in despair and gives up still cares about it. It hurts him that he doesn't have it. He's in pain that he doesn't have it. It's just that he doesn't have any hope of getting it. What's worse than despair is indifference. Indifference where the person says, it doesn't bother me that I don't have it. And I'll give you an example of this kind of indifference. There's a character, an element of character, which is called lahachis. Now, lahachis, if you look up in the dictionary, means I did it for spite. But the English translations, I should warn you about this, the dictionaries have mistakes in them, sometimes just brutal mistakes, and sometimes mistakes of nuance. Rashi describes the hachis in the following way. Imagine you have two pieces of meat. And the two pieces of meat, in all physical respects, are identical. They weigh the same grade of meat, they've been cooked in the same way, seasoned in the same way. They're both of equal quality. If you had to choose between one and the other, you'd pay the same amount for the two of them because they're really of equal quality. There's only one difference between them. One is kosher and one is treif. Now imagine a person who under those circumstances says, well, which one shall I eat? I'll flip a coin. That means that being kosher counts for nothing. It counts for nothing. Because if being kosher counted for anything, he's got a choice between the two pieces of meat, he chooses the kosher one, because he has nothing to lose. If he flips a coin, that's also called lahachis, because it means your attitude towards the Kodesh Baruch Hu, and of course the Torah is, forget it. No interest. Have a nice day. Right? That's worse than despair. Much worse than despair. I lived in Baltimore for 10 years. We're very close to Amram Taub, Zichrono Livracha there. And he once told me, he used to speak in parables. He said, if you see two people on the street and one slaps the other one in the face, they know each other. Right. They know each other. Or, for example, as has been said, a person who comes out of the Holocaust, and you can't judge anybody who comes out of the Holocaust in any condition whatsoever, but he comes out of the Holocaust hating God, he's not an atheist. Because the atheist would say, it's just accident. Nothing happens for any reason. Things happen because of the perversion of people's character, whatever it is. Wouldn't hate God. The person who hates God is still in touch with the idea of God. Hasn't just sloughed it off. So, even if we have two successes, one success is victory, and one success to stay in the battle. But despair isn't defeat, not ultimate defeat. The ultimate defeat would be indifference. Now, you have a question?
I was just thinking that if you struggle, let's say you struggle something for so long, and you feel, but no matter how much you fight, you just can't attain that which you're fighting for. Is there anything, if you decide that just to be grateful for so to speak, give up the fight and just be grateful for what you have, is that becoming different?
All right, you're almost reading my mind. That's the kind of subject that I wanted to bring up now. So let me take a step behind first, then I'll come to your question. And if I forget, you can remind me. I don't know. Do people use the buzz term cognitive dissonance anymore? Or are they giving that up? It seems like they've given it up. Not a bad loss. What it means is like this. I'll give you an example. We had a boy here in the yeshiva. This was like 15 or 20 years ago. He was here for a few weeks, and then one day he's packing his bags. So somebody asked him, why are you packing your bags? He said, I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. So the guy pressed him. He said, listen, I'm listening to these rabbis talk. I'm talking to the other students. You know, it might be true. It might be true, but I can't face that. If it's true, I'll have to remake, I can't face that. And I don't want to hear it. So I'm getting out of here. There, the tension is between what your mind tells you is true or might be true on the one hand, and what you're committed to in terms of your way of life on the other hand. And when you sense a tension between them, there are two ways to go. One way is to say, okay, I've got to work on bringing my life into tune with what I know is true. And the other is, I don't want to hear that it's true. I want to forget about it. By the way, this applies in psychology in another way as well. If your desires are out of tune with your resources, if you really want a lot more than what you have, and that causes disappointment and dissatisfaction and so forth and so on, there are two ways to resolve it. One is to work to get to more resources. The other is to reduce your desires. Either one will bring harmony, and you could do both. Either one will bring harmony between the two. So here, one thing you have to worry about is that if you have this goal and you're working on the goal and you're consistently not succeeding in accomplishing the goal, and you feel, well, maybe I should just live without the goal. That may be your failure to achieve the goal corrupting your logic, corrupting your reason, so as to relieve the tension between the goal that you know applies to you on the one hand, and the lack of success in achieving the goal. And that's really a tragedy when other aspects of your personality corrupt your reason. Then you are really in a bad place. And this Sfarim talk about this. And Sfarim talks about this. Other Sfarim talk about this. That the interaction between the brain and the heart, between the intellect and the emotions, is a two-way street. And just like the intellect can have an effect on molding the emotions. So the emotions, not every philosophy agrees to this, but I don't know if Chabad agrees to it, but the B'lai Musa certainly do. The emotions can have a negative effect on your intellect as well, and then the tension between them becomes a real problem. Now, if you went for the compromise, look, nobody told me I'm supposed to give up on this. So maybe because Baruch Hu's goal for me is that I should fight for this my whole life, and therefore not define yourself as a failure. That's what I wanted to imply with the way I chose the subject. One success can be staying in the battle, and if this thought that you have that maybe I should just content myself without it and leave it alone, that would be poison, because the idea is to stay in the battle. Yeah.
Kind of focusing on the idea of staying in the battle and success within the battle, when you kind of use the example of addiction, that kind of thing of trying to quit your addiction but continuously failing and trying and failing, I don't know how that could be seen as success.
Well, you see, the question is what you see, you're thinking of success in behavioral terms, doing the right thing, right? But we think of success in spiritual terms. Now, let me use a bridge to get to the last half of the subject. So now, you could reduce the frequency of acting out in the addiction. That would also be a success. Right. If you used to do it sailing along in the addiction 5 times a day, and now you're doing it 3 times a day, that's a partial success. But that's a success in behavior. But in spiritual terms, the spiritual term is that I'm still fighting to overcome it. And even if the frequency stays the same, you're not spiritually dead because you're still fighting to overcome it, right? And it could be that that's all you're given. You're not going to get any more than that. And that will be your accomplishment. You stayed in the battle. I mean, think of wars. In Europe, they had the 30-year war. What was the life of a successful soldier? Well, he fought for 20 years, and then he went home, and then he died. Right? He didn't win the war. The war was still going, but he's a faithful soldier. And he deserves credit for that. Yeah.
At what point do we reward the relapsing of an addiction before we get to a point where, okay, you have the tools and you have the ability to officially squash this and see this addiction at a new level, but you haven't, your body itself has this, like, you're stuck in between limbo where you think you can't, but in reality, like, you can.
But you think you can't.
Yeah, like, you think you can, you just feel like you're overcome with such, like, vigor from...
You know, this really happens to people. For example, when new rehabilitation programs open up, and a person's tried rehabilitation, failed, and you tell them, yeah, but there's a new program, and it seems to be working better, and you really ought to try it, and he says, I can't do it. I can't put myself through that again, especially since I failed once. So this is relevant to a different shiur, but I think it's appropriate to use coercion, because if you use coercion and you succeed, he'll thank you for the rest of his life. So I don't believe in letting everybody make their own decisions, and I don't believe in autonomy as a general universal goal. But let me now attack this problem with another point of view. Let's talk about a mitzvah, Shabbos, or Lashon Hara, or whatever it is. Here's the crucial principle: it's not all or nothing. It can be a process. Many years ago, I was in Detroit. I was talking to a businessman who was becoming interested in Torah, and he said to me, Rabbi, look, from time to time, I've spent an Orthodox Shabbos, and it's very inspiring and very enjoyable, but I have a problem. I just can't keep every Shabbos. I can't do it. I said, really, what's the problem? He says, well, I have to play golf on Shabbos. I said, really? You do? I'm like, why is that? He said, I'll tell you why. Because I'm a negotiator for my company, and contracts are signed by negotiating on the golf links. And very often the other guy wants to play on Shabbos. And I can't risk my job. I can't lose my job. I just can't do it. So I said to him, on the average, how many times a month do you have to play golf on Shabbos? He said 2. So I said, so keep 2 a month. Keep 2 a month. Now, here we have to be very careful. I'm not telling him, it's okay to keep 2 a month, you're different, you're in a difficult situation, so no, it's not okay. He's really obligated to do it 4 times a month. But there's a difference between 0 and 2. 2 is much better. First of all, those 2 Shabbos he kept. Number 2, he's building up his habit. He's building up his commitment. He's building up his connection. And maybe later he'll change jobs or change position in the company or whatever it is. So every mitzvah can be subdivided. I had the same thing. This goes back many years. We had a boy here from Michigan State University. He was here for the summer. And he kept 5 Shabbos in a row. And he said, Rabbi, the Shabbos is really, it's wonderful. I'm going back to Michigan State, and the top priority of Michigan State University is football. And number 2 is football. Number 3 is football. And then you go downhill from there. And he said, and don't talk to me about football. I'm not listening. That's just off the page. And football is Saturday afternoon. So I said to him, keep Friday night. So far, anyway, they don't have football games Friday night. Other things are going on Friday night, I'm told. So, again, no one says that there's a 12-hour Shabbos. No. But if this is what you can do at this time, so then that's what you should do. Here's an example from Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is very difficult. Lashon Hara is speaking true remarks that are derogatory, negative about another Jew. And according to many, you can't even listen. So if somebody starts talking Lashon Hara, put your fingers in your ears, or make an excuse, then and leave. That's very difficult. But how about starting with 2 hours a day? So let's say, for example, from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. No, that's silly. Okay, right, we're sleeping then. From 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Those 2 hours are going to be clean. So I get a call at 3:45. Did you hear about Philip? Yeah. Philip. Call back at 4:15, okay? Then I can talk to you. Right now, these are my clean hours. I can't do that. Right? No. So what is that? That's some kind of joke? That kind of self-deception? No, it's 2 clean hours.
Habituation.
And if you start that way, then after 2 clean hours becomes easy, you can extend it to 3 hours. And even if you never extend it to 3 hours, you're 2 hours ahead. So subdividing every mitzvah is appropriate. And even if you'll say, which can happen, I know you told me to start easy, and I started with 2 hours, but thinking about it, talking to other people, I really could have done 4 hours. So I'm really cheating. Maybe so. But 2 hours is better than no hours. So even if you're cheating somewhat, and you're not making a full effort, you're making some effort. This means you're in the fight. This means you're in the battle. And sometimes you are doing everything that you can do. Now, because, as again, we said at the beginning, not every obstacle is a challenge because you don't have the ability. I'll tell you one case. I'm not allowed to say the name of the rabbi. I didn't get permission, but I know who he is. A 14-year-old girl wrote to a rabbi, I've decided to keep Shabbos, and my parents have told me, you will not keep Shabbos. Not that we won't keep Shabbos to help you and so forth and so on. You will not keep Shabbos. That's what my parents told me. What should I do? And he said, don't keep Shabbos. Now, parents have no authority to tell a child not to keep Shabbos. Absolutely not. Their word is going against God's word, and the mitzvah is to keep Shabbos. But she's not able to do it. This is what's called onus in our vocabulary. She's not able to do it. So, and I'll tell you, you don't set up a fight between a 14-year-old girl and her parents. When I was becoming religious at university, we had one boy in the group who was interested and began to associate with us and started to change his behavior. His parents found out about it. They took him out of university and for a year sent him to a psychiatrist. And when he came back the following year, he was cured. He was programmed in such a way that he couldn't hear a word we were saying. So she's not going to win this battle. So they tell her she doesn't have to fight this battle. So all of these things are a matter of recognizing what's possible, what's not possible, making a judgment, which is not infallible, but at least making a judgment, and doing what you can. If you do that, you're still in the battle. And even, take even more extreme example, and this occurs to every religious Jew, about tshuva or not about tshuva, especially when you come to Yom Kippur and you think, where am I holding? Well, there's some ups and there's some downs. How many downs? 23? No, that's not so terrible. 17. 17 downs. What should I work on? All of them? Or should I set priorities? And here, part of the perspective is what can you expect as a long-term gain. Let's suppose you pick one that's very, very hard. It'll take 4 years to master. During those 4 years, the other 16 are going to be in limbo. They're going to be waiting. Maybe it's better off taking 4 of them, which are easier ones, and accomplishing all of those. And that becomes a foundation of accomplishment. And it's self-reinforcing, and then gives you the strength to take on the more difficult ones. So if you have the 17, you decide to do 4, 13 are going to be put on hold. That's not ignoring them. That's not a failure. You're in the battle. You're in the war now, I would say, instead of the battle. You're fighting the war with the best strategy possible. You're in the fight. So you're spiritually alive. And this can be your victory. This can be your success. This can be your success. So we mustn't be narrow-minded and simple-minded about the definition of success. And the way, when you look at a mitzvah, some mitzvahs, if you take them in their whole definition, are very vast and very difficult. So you subdivide it, and the subdivision depends upon you. What resources you have, how much time you have, how many friends you have to support you, what knowledge you have or don't have, and you divide it up in a way where you can handle the first step and you take each step in turn. By the way, this is very similar to what's called behavioral therapy, where you divide up a goal into small steps and you reward each of the steps when it's done successfully. And the fact that you were succeeded at that step then gives you the reinforcement to be able to take the next step. And I think that is one of a dozen or more important attitudes towards psychology, instead of making it everything, which is the sin of almost every theory of psychology. Take one true thing and make it the entire story of what psychology is about. But I think it is a very useful strategy. And the slogan that I would recommend, I would think this should be up emblazoned on the wall: don't despise small steps. One of the tricks of the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, 2 hours a day, who are you fooling? 22 hours, minus 7 hours of sleep, 15 hours a day, you're going to foul your mouth with talking about other people and listen to it and joke about it and everything else. And 2 hours not? You're behaving like a baby. Do the thing that you have to do, all of it. He wants you to get into that mindset because he knows you can't do the whole thing, and he knows you'll fail, and he knows you'll give up. That's his trick. So you don't despise small steps. I always tell people, think of a brick building. Think of Manhattan. You have 80-story brick buildings. How big is a brick? About this big, right? And you can build 80 stories out of it. Don't despise small steps. If each day is a brick, and in each day you took a tiny step forward, over years you'll have thousands of steps. You have climbed a mountain. So don't despise small steps. That means you're in the battle. And if it is true that all you can do is take those small steps, if that's correct, then I think, this is maybe controversial, I think you count as having done tshuva for what you've done. Because Baruch Hu never asks of you more than you're able to do. So you've done it. Later on, you'll have greater abilities, and then more will be asked of you. But in the meantime, that's what you'll be able to do. So this is the encouragement to do this. And I want to stress again, I'm not saying this to you because some of you come from no background like I did, and you're making your way in. This is not something which is a kind of excuse for people who don't have a good background, because the more background you have, the more you learn, the more you'll appreciate what more there is to do. So you never run out of goals ahead of you. And that being the case, no matter how far along you are, there'll always be those other goals you haven't achieved yet. And then the question will be how to relate to them. And everybody relates to them this way. So I don't think that you have to feel, this is a relaxed attitude for second-class citizens. No, this is real Torah Judaism. I'll give you maybe one last source for this, and this is about spiritual development. The Rambam writes in the 5th chapter of the Laws of Tshuva, since everyone has free will, everyone has the ability to turn himself to a path which will lead him to be a tzaddik, to be righteous. The Rambam's not in the habit of talking poetry. He does it sometimes, but not always. Why don't he simply say, since you have free will, you have it in your power to be a tzaddik? No, he puts up two barriers. First you have to turn yourself. You're not even facing in the right direction. And then after you turn yourself, you get on the path. And you walk the path, and you become a tzaddik at the end. Because the idea of snapping your fingers and becoming a tzaddik isn't a challenge. It's not a challenge because you're not able to do it. The Rabbi is describing a process. And that process will take time. And he's acknowledging that it's going to be a step-by-step process, and you're not going to be there the rest of the time. So I hope this is, this is a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it takes off the pressure of I haven't succeeded in rectifying all my behavior, or my behavior isn't obviously changing, and therefore I'm a spiritual loss. No. But on the other hand, because of that, it does keep the responsibility to do what you can, and not to simply say, these are limitations. I remember once when I was living in Baltimore, we had ethnic fairs in the summertime. There was a Jewish ethnic fair. Those of the Orthodox community went down to the ethnic fair to talk to the missionaries who came down to missionize Jews, and to keep them from talking to Jews who wouldn't know how to answer. That was our purpose there. But one guy came over to me, a Reformed Jew, and we were talking for a little bit, and he was very self-satisfied. Very self-satisfied. And that bothered me. You can sort of imagine that it irked me that he was so self-satisfied. So I said to him, are you perfect? He said, no, of course not. I said, what are you doing to try to improve? And he said, Rabbi, I accept myself as I am. I eat well, I sleep well. I accept myself as I am, with my imperfections. That really irritated me. So I said, you have children? Yes. 12-year-old son. I said, what would happen if the truant officers would come home with your son and say, we caught him at a local business stealing stuff, and you say to your son, what? You were skipping school and stealing? He said, yeah, Dad, it's true. I do skip school and I steal stuff, but don't worry, Dad. I eat well. I sleep well. I'm satisfied with myself as I am. How'd you deal with that? He said, I have an appointment and I have to go. Right? That's the worst case, where the person says, I don't care that I'm not perfect. I don't care that I'm not working to improve. That's spiritual death. That's real spiritual death. As opposed even to Yush, which is not yet spiritual death. That's the Chiddush that Rav Kook said. Okay? All right.